the small town of Ravensbrook was the kind of place people drove through without ever noticing. Its faded signs and overgrown fields betrayed decades of neglect, mirroring the fate of its most infamous landmark, the old St. Mary's Orphanage. Nestled at the edge of a dense forest, the orphanage had been abandoned for nearly 50 years, its stone walls crumbling and windows shattered. Locals avoided it, passing down chilling tales of ghostly apparitions and eerie sounds that emanated from its darkened halls. It was the perfect destination for Eric, Jenna, and Marcus, three friends with a penchant for urban exploration. They had documented their adventures in forgotten places on their YouTube channel, and St. Mary's promised to be their most thrilling find yet. With cameras, flashlights, and a sense of bravado, they set out on a crisp autumn afternoon, the sun casting long shadows over the winding road that led to the orphanage. "Are you sure about this?" Jenna asked, her voice betraying a mix of excitement and apprehension as they parked their car near the entrance. Eric, the de facto leader of the group, grinned. "Come on, Jenna. This place is legendary. Imagine the views we'll get. Besides, it's just an old building. What's the worst that could happen?" Marcus, ever the skeptic, shrugged. "As long as we're careful and stick together, we'll be fine. Let's just get some great footage and get out." The trio climbed over the rusted gates, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path that led to the front door. The orphanage loomed ahead, its stone facade covered in ivy, giving it an almost otherworldly appearance. Eric pushed open the heavy wooden door, its hinges creaking in protest, and they stepped into the dark, musty interior. The foyer was vast, with a grand staircase leading to the upper floors and doorways branching off into various rooms. Dust motes danced in the beams of sunlight that pierced through the broken windows, casting an eerie glow on the decaying furniture and peeling wallpaper. "Let's start with the main hall," Eric suggested, switching on his flashlight. "We can work our way up from there." They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The main hall was a cavernous room, once a place of gathering and joy for the orphans, now a hollow shell filled with the remnants of a forgotten past. Torn curtains hung limply from their rods, and broken toys littered the floor. A piano stood in the corner, its keys yellowed and silent. Jenna aimed her camera at the piano. "Imagine the stories this place could tell," she murmured. Marcus shivered. "Yeah, if walls could talk. Let's get some shots of the upstairs. I heard there's a chapel that's still mostly intact." As they ascended the staircase, a cold breeze swept through the hall, rustling the pages of an old book left on a table. The air grew colder, and Jenna wrapped her jacket tighter around herself. The upper floors were even more dilapidated. Dormitory rooms lined the corridors, their doors hanging ajar. The group moved from room to room, capturing footage of decaying beds and personal belongings left behind. It was as if the children had vanished overnight, leaving their lives frozen in time. When they reached the chapel, they found it relatively untouched. Stained glass windows, though cracked, still filtered colorful light onto the pews below. An altar stood at the front, draped in a dusty cloth, and above it hung a large wooden cross. "This place is incredible," Eric whispered, reverently setting up his camera for a wide shot. "It's like stepping back in time." Jenna moved closer to the altar, her curiosity piqued by an old, leather-bound book lying there. She gently opened it, revealing handwritten notes and sketches. "Look at this. It's a journal." Marcus joined her, peering over her shoulder. "What does it say?" "It's hard to read, but it looks like it belonged to one of the nuns," Jenna said, flipping through the pages. "There are mentions of strange occurrences, children disappearing, and rituals." Eric's eyes widened. "Rituals? That sounds ominous. We need to get this on camera." As they filmed the journal, an eerie feeling settled over the room. The temperature seemed to drop further, and the faint sound of whispers echoed around them. Jenna glanced around nervously. "Did you hear that?" Marcus nodded, gripping his flashlight tighter. Yeah, it sounded like whispering. Probably just the wind, Eric said, though his voice lacked conviction. Let's finish up here and check out the basement. I heard there's a creepy old cellar down there. The stairs to the basement were narrow and steep, their wooden steps creaking underfoot. The air grew damp and musty as they descended, the light from their flashlights barely penetrating the darkness. At the bottom, they found themselves in a maze of stone-walled rooms and corridors, each more foreboding than the last. Spread out and see what you can find, Eric instructed, his voice echoing off the walls. But stay within shouting distance. Jenna wandered into a small room filled with old crates and rusted tools. As she sifted through the debris, she found a small, locked box. Intrigued, she called out to the others. Hey, I found something. Eric and Marcus joined her, and together they managed to pry the box open. Inside, they discovered a collection of photographs and letters, all dated from the 1920s. The images depicted the children and staff of the orphanage, but as they flipped through them, the photos grew increasingly disturbing. Faces appeared gaunt and hollow-eyed, and some images showed shadowy figures lurking in the background. This is seriously creepy, Marcus muttered. What were they doing here? Jenna unfolded one of the letters, her hands trembling. It says something about the children's salvation and a cleansing ritual. This doesn't sound like anything good. A sudden noise echoed through the basement, like the slamming of a heavy door. They all jumped, their flashlights darting around in search of the source. Maybe we should get out of here, Jenna suggested, her voice shaking. Eric, however, was determined. Just a little longer. We're so close to uncovering something big. Reluctantly, they pressed on, moving deeper into the basement. They came across a large, iron-bound door at the end of a corridor. It was slightly ajar, and a faint, flickering light could be seen within. Who's there? Eric called out, pushing the door open further. The room beyond was a large, circular chamber, with strange symbols etched into the walls and floor. In the center stood an altar, upon which lay a book and a collection of candles, their flames casting eerie shadows. Jenna gasped. This must be where they performed the ritual. As they approached the altar, the temperature dropped drastically, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Marcus shone his flashlight on the book, revealing more handwritten notes and incantations. I don't like this, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We need to leave. Now. Before they could react, the door slammed shut behind them, plunging the room into darkness. The candles flickered and went out, leaving only the beam of their flashlights. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The whispers grew louder, now clearly voices chanting in an unknown language. Jenna clutched at Eric's arm. What's happening? Eric tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. It's locked. How is that possible? Marcus backed away from the altar, his flashlight shaking. We need to find another way out. As they searched the room, the chanting intensified, and shadows began to move independently of the flickering light. A cold, oppressive presence filled the chamber, pressing down on them. Jenna screamed as she saw a figure materialize in the corner, a gaunt, robed figure with hollow eyes. Who are you? Eric demanded, though his voice wavered with fear. The figure raised a bony hand, pointing at them. You should not have come here, it intoned in a hollow voice. The children's souls are not at rest, and neither shall you be. The shadows around the room seemed to come alive, creeping towards them with malevolent intent. Jenna clung to Eric, tears streaming down her face. Please, let us go. The figure's eyes glowed with an unholy light. The ritual must be completed. Only then will the children be freed. Eric, desperate to escape, grabbed the book from the altar. What do you want? What do we need to do? The figure's voice grew louder, almost a roar. Read the incantations. Finish what was started. With no other choice, Eric began to read from the book, his voice trembling. The shadows recoiled at the words, and the chanting grew even more frenzied. The temperature dropped further, their breath visible in the cold air. As Eric continued to read, a blinding light filled the room, and the shadows screamed in agony. The figure writhed, its form flickering and fading. The walls shook, and the symbols etched into them glowed with an eerie light. Finally, with a final, guttural scream, the figure dissipated, and the shadows melted away. The chanting ceased, and the room was plunged into silence. The oppressive presence lifted, leaving the trio gasping for breath. The door creaked open, and they stumbled out into the corridor, desperate to escape the basement. They hurried back up the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. As they emerged into the foyer, the sunlight was fading, casting long shadows over the decaying interior. "We need to leave," Marcus panted, his face pale. "Now." They rushed to the front door, bursting out into the cool evening air. The forest around the orphanage seemed less foreboding in the fading light, but the memories of what they had encountered would haunt them forever. As they drove away, Jenna looked back at the orphanage, its dark silhouette looming against the horizon. "Do you think the children are at peace now?" Eric shook his head, his grip tight on the steering wheel. "I don't know. But I do know one thing, we're never coming back here." Marcus nodded in agreement. Some places are better left forgotten. The video of their exploration went viral, drawing both awe and skepticism from viewers. Some praised their bravery, while others dismissed the events as staged. But for Eric, Jenna, and Marcus, the experience was all too real. The horrors they had faced in St. Mary's Orphanage left a permanent mark on their souls. They never returned to Ravensbrück, and their channel took a different direction, focusing on safer, less haunted locations. But late at night, when the world was quiet and the shadows crept in, they could still hear the faint whispers of the forgotten children, calling out from the darkness of the old, abandoned building.